Me nipple. How you doing, guys? Big Mac Danscore here again today, back once again with another episode of Warhammer Thoughty. So, what is this week's episode about? You'll have seen in the title, it's called, I'm making the title up now, Grieving in Wargaming. Now, what this video is about is basically when things change in Wargaming, like at the minute, we're going in Warhammer 40,000, we're going from 7th edition to 8th edition. When things change and you lose things, like whether it's a rule, a character, an entire faction in some cases, something like that, or the name of a faction or whatever, you know, can you go through a grieving process? Now, to someone not into wargaming and not invested like many people out there are, they would probably watch this video, see me say that, and then turn it off and think, that's ridiculous. How can you grieve for little plastic men? You know, oh, I'm never going to get to use these. Let's take it back to the 90s now, back to the 80s, 90s. Well, they were still around in the 90s, so let's take it back to the 90s. Squats, right? Can you grieve? Did people go through a grieving process when squats got retconned? Let's examine that, shall we? Yes. So at the minute, like I said, in the Warhammer 40,000 rule set, the rules are being updated, and we're going from 7th edition to 8th edition. Now, this is such a big change. The rules are being so radically changed that every single faction in the game, is basically getting rules updates. So at launch, every faction, every unit in every faction is going to have new rules. However, some units may be not updated. They may be just like defunct now. This is the case for certain things in certain Forge World books. Now, Forge World produces books called Imperial Armor books. And there's been about 13, 14, 15 of them, something like that. And in a particular one called Doom of Mine Mirror, there was a character called Bran Redmore. Now, I watched a video. The reason I'm doing this video now is because I watched a video today, and it was Wolf Brother Mythos from the channel Frost and Fist. Make sure you check him out. I'll put a link in the description below. Yeah, so Wolf Brother Mythos did his Wolf Brother Wednesday video. It's just like a general channel on hobby update video, where he talks about what he's been painting that week, what he's been getting up to in life in general. And he was very upset, and I'd say distraught, annoyed, angry. He was going through a lot of emotions. You could see it. You could see his frustration in the video. It wasn't completely blowing up or anything. You know, he's not about to take his Space Wolves outside, light them on fire, or anything like that. But he's very frustrated, angry, annoyed. Like I said, one of his favourite characters in Space Wolf lore is not getting a rules update in this new edition, or not immediately anyway. Now, one of the reasons he was angry is because initially Forge World said all the Imperial Armor books and all the characters in them, therefore, will get rules updates. But the way the Forge World rules updates are working is basically there's going to be similar to in the main Games Workshop hobby and the Games Workshop rules updates. They're happening. The way they're happening is you get in 2 Imperial books which have various Imperial factions in them, one or the other. One's like mainly Space Marines, and the other one's like all the other Imperium, like Imperial Guard, Imperial Knights, Inquisition, blah blah blah. There's 2 Xenos books, one containing all the Eldar and Necrons, one containing Tyranids, Orcs, and Tau. And then there's a Chaos book which contains all the Chaos factions. So there's 5 books. Now, Forge World are doing something very similar. They're splitting the factions into different books. So anything that was in Doom of Mime era relating to Eldar is now in a Xenos book, and that covers Eldar, Tau. I'm not sure if it covers Orcs, maybe. Chaos are getting a book, and Imperium are getting 2 books. Same as Games Workshop. But there's that much stuff in the Imperial Armour Forge World books that they've had to trim it here and there. And unfortunately for Wolf Brother Mythos, one of the things that got cut was Bran Redmore. Now, like I said, he was absolutely devastated. He was in touch with Forge World. I think he was emailing them or possibly contacting them on Facebook. You know, trying to get some kind of explanation as to why Bran Redmore was cut. So Bran Redmore, just to go over the character and the richness of the character, and maybe, you know, some of the reason why Mythos was so attached to the character. It's, you know, I don't know everything about the character, but it's basically my understanding that he's one of the captains of one of the great companies, one of the Space Wolf great companies, and he's got these rules where he kind of wolfs out, and he gets overtaken by the Wolfen Curse during the course of a game, something along those lines. And you kind of, most people use 2 models for represent him. They use his standard Space Marine power armor model. You know, he's got his big bushy Space Wolf beard and hair and stuff like that. And then he's got, most people use like a werewolf character of some sort, or, you know, maybe people use a Wolfen miniature now to represent him when he's all wolfed out. So his rules can change throughout the game, because it's like he's a really fluffy character. That's what a lot of things happen. The way a lot of the Forge World books are written, they're written around characters that are kind of a bit more specific and a bit more narratively driven. So yeah, it's a really cool character. Now, years ago at a Forge World Open Day, they released a miniature for it. Oh, they didn't release a miniature, sorry. They previewed a miniature for it. So everyone thought Bran Redmore was going to get a miniature. Eventually, that came to nothing. The Bran Redmore miniature never got released. So, as with a lot of things relating to Games Workshop in the past, say, 5 years, let's say Tyranids for argument's sake, or for example rather, Tyranids had a lot of units in their previous codex that they didn't have models for, and then third parties were creating models for people to buy, and they were selling them as Tyranid, Mycetic Spore, Meiotic Spore, blah, whatever. So Games Workshop then had issues with defending their IP and stuff like that. So any new rules updates or codex updates that they tend to chop out any units that they don't have a model for, they don't produce a model for. So because Forge World have never produced a model apart from this example one, this preview one, prototype if you like, one of the things that got caught is the Bran Redmore miniature. Now, like I said, Mythos was absolutely distraught, and what I'm asking is, do you think that you can grieve for something like that? Because Mythos is really invested in that miniature, that character, the whole idea. This Space Wolf is in battle, he's furious, he's getting more and more worked up, and then however the rules happen in the game on the battlefield, he then transforms into this wolfen character, so it adds a little more narrative to your game. And for me, when you get hooked on a narrative, that's when you really become invested in something. If you get hooked on a narrative sense of something, whether it's let's say you've got a Space Wolf, just a Fenrisian wolf, and he kills Gazkul Thraka or something like that, then you might then think, maybe I should upgrade him to a Cyber Wolf, and you become more invested through that miniature's exploits. You become more invested, and if there's a whole story and a background written by Games Workshop or by Forge World as well, you can get invested because of that. So there's fluff based around this character, Bran Redmore, and people read it and really like it and get attached to it, and then all of a sudden they chop him out of the latest update for the the rules update, they chop him out of the Imperial Index, or the Space Marine Index, whatever it is from Forge World. So I genuinely think you go through a sort of grieving process, basically. For want of a better word, for want of a better description, you go through a kind of grieving process because it's something you've grown to love, in a sense. You've become really attached to, and even if it's something you become really attached to because it's amazing in game or something, you've become attached to it for whatever reason, and then you do have to go through like a grieving process, like, oh, I can't do that anymore. Let's talk about just the 40k hobby and the way it's changing now. Eldar, a lot of Eldar players have jetbike spam, or tournament Eldar players maybe have jetbike spam, or warp spider spam, or whatever. But let's talk about jetbike spam in particular. Jetbike spam is going to be a little more tricky to play now, and I think you're going to see it a little less because the way they've updated the rules, jetbikes can't shoot and then move into cover and stuff like that. So you're going to see different builds of armies coming up in the tournament scene and everything like that. So people may have to, or they don't have to, of course, they can keep their models, they can put them in a display cabinet like I would, but some people, will just stop playing their models altogether. But I guess it depends how narratively invested you are in the game. But if, you don't have to be narratively invested to be annoyed by a rules change. But I wouldn't say that's the same thing as grieving, because yes, you might be annoyed at first, but at the end of the day, if you play the hobby that way, like sort of power gaming, if you like, if you play the hobby that way, you're going to go out and buy the best army for yourself anyway. So expect to, when the rules change, that you're going to have to go out and buy a whole new set of models if you don't already own them. Yeah, so for me, the more narratively invested you are in a game, the more likely you are to grieve for something like that. I was quite taken aback by how emotional Mythos was getting in his video. But then I kind of thought to myself, you know what? If you do become hooked on something like that, whether it's well, let's talk about Dark Eldar Codex. I know Kablam's had a he's got a Dark Eldar army now, but it's a Dark Eldar Coven army. Before that, yeah, I think he had like a Dark Eldar Hellion and Reaver army, where it's fast-moving units, and it was based around this character called. Bear with me. Sorry guys, I just had to check on my iPad, double check a character's name, because I didn't want getting mixed up with a Star Wars character. In my head I was thinking, oh, this name I'm about to say is a Star Wars character. Yeah, but basically, this Dark Eldar army Kablam's used to have was based around this character called Duke Siliscus, and then in the next update of the Dark Eldar Codex, the character was gone, so his whole army was almost like, well, I can't play that anymore. Yeah, he could have made up his. It was like an Archon character, and I don't. It was before I was subscribed to Kablam's channel, but I've heard him talking about it. But yeah, he really liked that narrative and the way that army played. So he did that, but now he doesn't have that army anymore. He's changed his whole Dark Eldar army because GW sort of wiped the slate clean, if you like, and came up with something new. So I think people do go through a grieving process of sorts for something that they are really attached to, even an inanimate object, as illogical as it may seem to someone outside of the hobby. I think people do genuinely go through a grieving process over things like that, and they'll come to terms with it a lot quicker than if they were grieving for something like a pet or a relative or something like that. But I think people do, genuinely go through a grieving process over things like this. So next time you see somebody having a rant on YouTube about how they hate how something has changed or disappeared, or how something's been retconned in a certain universe, just sit back and think, maybe they are just really emotionally invested in that. People sort of dedicate their lives to hobbies like this. So just sit back and take a minute or two to think before you jump to judgment. Yeah, so you let me know what you think in the comments below. You might think I'm talking utter rubbish. If you do, tell me in the comments below. So we'll leave it there, guys. Thanks very much for watching, and I will see you on the battlefield.